Today on the show, a conversation about entrepreneurship in Chattanooga with a man who knows a lot about it. Today, I talked to Cam Doody. He co-founded and he and his team built moving startup Bellhop. Cam is now a founder at Chattanooga's Brickyard. Brickyard invests in early stage startups. They bring those founders to Chattanooga so they can all learn and grow together.
The teams that come here are here for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And when you're in that environment, you know, these founders just know one thing. It's like, okay, if you want to get to product market fit, it's going to take everything that you have to give. And this is really a maximalist approach to leaving it all on the field.
This is Morrowtown, Tennessee.
November of 2012 was when we moved to Chattanooga, and that was our first round of venture capital. So we'd raised some friends and family money. You know, our parents put in some, you know, gave us some loans that we, you know, ultimately paid back. But our first equity financing was actually, you know, here in Chattanooga with Lamppost. So they wrote our first check. So we moved here for, I think the first check was $600,000, and you know, over the last 10 years or so, the Bellhop's raised about $120 million and from all over the country. And yeah, I mean, we fell in love with the city, and we would rather be no other place.
What was that ride like? Right, because I read somewhere recently it was like the second biggest moving company in the country or something. You know, Bellhop's is growing from, like you said, just you and...
It was absolutely wild. I mean, when we first, so the original concept with Bellhops was we wanted to provide like a realistic option for college students to be able to move, because no one hired moving companies. You really just needed like Bellhops to take your stuff out of your car and up to your dorm room. And that's where the name came from. And we kind of quickly realized that the student moving business was so spiky, you just couldn't build a business around 3 days of moving college kids into dorms. And so, you know, the Bellhop story was just this constant march up market where parents started asking us to load their U-Hauls, so we started doing that. And then they started asking us to go pick up U-Hauls and do their job, and we ended up becoming a top 10 customer of U-Haul in like 2016. Where we were running this huge nationwide workforce of Bellhops, but we didn't own any trucks. We were just booking U-Hauls online, and our Bellhops were going and picking up these trucks and doing the move and taking the truck back. And U-Haul had a competitive labor marketplace called movinghelp.com, and they ultimately saw us cannibalize their business. And so they shut us down in the middle of peak season in 2016.
Wow.
And we had something like 2,500 trucks rented for that month on moves that we were doing, and they all went away. And so now we had 2,500 customers that were like expecting their move to get done. And I had randomly met like an investor in Penske on a vacation, and who knew the CEO of Penske. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, look, I know this is a Hail Mary, but we have to move 2,500 trucks to you guys this month. And a day later, their executive team flew into Chattanooga, and we figured out how to move all of those moves over to Penske. And that's really when we decided we need to actually, you know, own our transportation segment. And but we didn't want to own trucks, and so that's when we started partnering with final mile carriers, and that's how Bellhops ultimately grew. Was we figured out how to break apart the labor and the trucking component of moving companies, and so we could grow faster than anybody else. So we ended up, you know, we've moved now close to, I think, 500,000 U.S. households,
right,
and still don't own a single truck. And that was really the story of the company.
When you look back over, 12 plus years of that, it's like the stories we tell ourselves, right? About our careers and our lives, right? There's a narrative there, but day to day back in 2013, 14, 15, like what was that? How much I mean, you were. I can only imagine the number of hours you're putting in. I mean, what was that like day to day to kind of be in the middle of that?
So, yeah, like it's kind of like you see the summit of Mount Everest from like 100 miles away, and you're like, okay, I know where I'm going. I know what I need to do, but the routing that you think you're going to take to get to the summit of Everest is, you have 100 false summits that you have to climb on the way to actually finding your path up. And so the day-to-day volatility of any of these companies that are building in that, the first 1 to 3 years post, raise, it's insane. And a lot of times you can't see the summit. It's like you're so mired in your day-to-day issues that, you feel like you're going in the right direction, and you just have to kind of persist through it.
Right.
And, but when you look back on any of the early days building a company, the pain in the present is like, it's pain and suffering. I mean, it is hard. It's like you are not having fun in those early days, with the exception of like, maybe 1 out of every 25 days is so stratospherically high where you feel like you have perfect clarity and you know how this is going to play out. The next 24 days are like the bottom of the bottom, where you're like, this is never going to work. And you just have to persist.
Where do you get the wherewithal to have this idea of like, I know today is going to be a hard day and tomorrow's going to be a hard day, but I know at the end of the thing it's going to work. I mean, and you really don't know, but you have to believe that you know. Like where does that kind of, attitude,
I think
come from?
A founder's main gift is delusional optimism.
Yeah.
It's like you looking back on what we were up against, knowing what we had to do to get Bellhop's where it is today. We were completely delusional. Like we had no business doing what we were doing. But when you're in the middle of it, you believe that you're going to win. You truly believe down to your core, like we know that we're David in the Goliath story, but you don't really understand the odds when you're in the middle of it, because it's do or die. It's like you're not, David's not like doing math in his head as what's the probability of me winning here. You're just trying not to die. And so it's just this sort of delusional optimism, showing up every day and going to work and trying to be neurotic around avoiding all these landmines that, are undoubtedly in front of you. It just takes a lot of thought.
Yeah. And along the way, I know a lot of people whose businesses didn't work, who had the same mindset and it didn't work out. But today you're in the middle of Brickyard. It's an interesting concept, but I even think when you guys were, part of Lamppost, I think being in town at the time, people knew what Lamppost was, but unless you were in it, it was hard for people outside to really define it. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And so walk me through a little bit of that, just kind of like how you decided to build what you've built here, kind of the second stage of your entrepreneurial career, and kind of like how you think about this.
So we knew, I think all along so Lamppost really wrote checks between 2012 and 2015. Mm-hmm. And then when Ted Allen and Barry sold their company, they kind of just needed to take a break. And so they stopped making investments. But we always knew that we were going to run it back at some point. But we were busy building our companies. Matt and I were still, deeply in the day-to-day at Bellhop's. And but right before COVID, we kind of all became free agents. We sold part of Bellhop's right before the pandemic. And I think we thought that we were going to start another company. And the more we all kind of started talking, it was clear we were going to run it back. We were going to do Lamppost again. But this time we were going to do it with a lot more focus, a lot clearer a mandate around what it is. But with a lot of this, foundational framework of, what really matters if you're a really early stage company is not what you're told by the mainstream venture narrative of, you need to be in New York, you need to be in San Francisco, you need to be going to the parties with the venture investors, you need to be going to these networking events. Like, none of that stuff matters in the early days. Ultimately, that stuff becomes more important as you start running a large organization, and you can kind of lift out of the business. But in the early days, it's talking to customers, shipping code, and selling, and that's it. And we kind of knew, having gone through it ourselves at Lamppost, when we moved here, we basically were in the Lovemans building off Market Street, 18 hours a day for years. And it was just, we were just in the trenches. And that really benefited us. We look back and we know if we had done it any other way, Bellhop's was such a monumental effort to get that flywheel going, because highly operational business, you have a lot of just headwinds, like, low gross margin business, low repeat rate with customers. It's a high impact job where if you mess up a move, it's not like messing up a taco delivery. A lot of just kind of core fundamental challenges that we had to deal with in getting that thing moving. And if we had not been in an environment where that was the only thing that we had to think about, I don't think it would ever have worked. And so what Brickyard is we bought this building off Main and Central, and we've turned it into we're an early stage venture capital firm. We're writing $300,000 or $400,000 checks into companies all over the world. But if you take capital from us, you understand that you're moving here to get to your Series A, which is really like your second institutional raise, second or third institutional raise. So we're coming in as usually a first check or in the first round, and these founders are coming here and they're building together in Brickyard in this sort of highly competitive but very familial place where people are, this isn't an accelerator that's lasts 10 weeks and we get a new batch in, every couple of years or every, few months or whatever. It's the teams that come here are here for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And when you're in that environment, these founders just know one thing. It's like, okay, if you want to get to product market fit, it's going to take everything that you have to give. And this is really a maximalist approach to leaving it all on the field in order to get to your Series A.
So how many companies are here with you now, and how big do you want it to be?
So we self-funded our first 16 companies because we didn't know if this was going to work like it worked the first time.
Yeah.
The founder ethos and culture has changed a lot over the last 10 years, where being a startup founder is now pop culture. It's like a status thing. It's, celebrities are investing in startups. It's like become this cool thing.
The Shark Tankification of everything, right?
Right. And it's like, none of that stuff matters. And, but what we realized was in order to do this right, we basically had to run back that same playbook. And so we're investing in these teams. They're coming here, putting their heads down, and they're, our goal with our companies is, if you raise capital from us, we expect you to raise a Series A. You should be able to raise a Series A. Yeah.
Yeah.
To your point around number of teams. So we've invested in 30 companies to date over the last little over 2 years, 17 of which are in Brickyard today. And we're doing about a deal every 6 weeks.
Okay. Yeah.
So
what is the advantage of being in Chattanooga? Like you said, when you were starting, you guys were 18 hours a day, head down, just working as hard as you could. What is being here mean for these companies, and what's the advantage of that?
It's an island.
Yeah.
Chattanooga functionally plays the role of, it's a special place, but it's totally away from the noise. And so when you pick up and come to a place like Chattanooga and you're building a company, you've got one thing to do. You're not distracted by everything else that happens in New York or San Francisco or whatever. you can really just put your head down. And that's really, that's the role that Chattanooga plays in Brickyard success. Is it's a great place, a very super cool place to be, but it's really not about economic development per se. It is, we know that a lot of the teams that come and build out a Brickyard will stay, but we put none of that expectation on the teams. Like, this is purely like, you're coming here to go faster, period. And we believe that you can do it faster here in this very specific time period between your first and second or third raise. We believe you can go faster here than you can anywhere else, just purely because it's you're coming to an island where you've got one thing to do.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, like you mentioned, economic development. What do you think that Brickyard does for Chattanooga? Because it does put the city on a map in a specific way around a specific group of people. That's hard to do, but you're doing it. But also, there is a level of kind of undergrounded, ness about it, where not everybody really understands all that you're doing.
Yeah, and that's I'm glad that you picked up on that, because we have teams from Cairo, from Belgium, from London, from 3 or 4 from Canada, 5 or 6 from SF, 5 or 6 from New York, all the usual suspects. But like, our brand is this if you know kind of thing. Yeah. And it's sort of this hardcore approach to, if you're serious, and you're not in startups because you want 30 under 30 or something, but if you're serious about building a big company, this is the place that you come and do it. And there's really sort of, for a number of years, people were just sort of in la-la land in venture capital, where there was so much froth and so much excess and so much money being piled into it, that I think everybody was just drinking the Kool-Aid, and people forgot, like, this is insanely hard work. And so we're building this brand for Brickyard around, how serious are you? Are you willing to move to a mid-sized city in Tennessee that you may never have heard of in your life, to focus everything and all your energy in doing this one thing? And if so, this becomes our thesis. Like, the only teams that we are backing are teams that one, we would invest in anyway, right? But 2, they are choosing to come and do this. And when they get here, they're in this, just hyper-focused environment where, the expectation is super high. And everybody that you're looking at on a daily basis is pushing harder than you are. And so it just sort of, it raises the bar for everybody.
Yeah. Talk about a little bit, kind of the idea of the evolution of entrepreneurship in Chattanooga, right? Because I know when Lamppost started, there's a lot of companies that were, you guys were part of this, they were part of this innovation district idea, and you have all the things like the collabs and things doing with what they're doing. But then there was a kind of a period when Lamppost kind of shifted to Dynamo, and I know companies were leaving Chattanooga because they couldn't get the support they needed. But this is definitely a kind of a rebirth, second chapter, but it's definitely a continuation of what was happening before. Can you just kind of, explain that? Because it did seem like the city and people around it were really excited about it, and then it kind of was a lull before the pandemic, and the pandemic was hard to. Right. Again, just share your thoughts on that.
One of the reasons why we did this was, Chattanooga is a city of builders, and we know that we're sort of staring this inbound interest in the face from everybody in Nashville and Atlanta and everywhere else that's looking for a place with super awesome access to the outdoor. I mean, Chattanooga is just the core product of what Chattanooga is wildly interesting to people post-pandemic, that is sort of have refactored what is important to them, and so when we think about how we are approaching, participating in that, we wanted to bring in the world's best builders to do it here. And, many of the people that are building inside of Brickyard today are going to be the city leaders of the city in 10 or 20 years. We have more YC-backed companies in Brickyard than exist in Nashville, probably more than even in Atlanta. And that's why, like, how did that happen? Right. And so the interesting thing around, what we're doing is over the next 7-8 years, we're going to bring another 100, 110, maybe 120 new companies, high growth, top 1%, what kind of Y Combinator grade, startups to Chattanooga. And like Bellhop's, we moved here for a $600,000 check. We went and raised $120 million over the next decade. Every one of these companies is on that same exact trajectory. And so what this could mean is if we put $50 million to work in the earliest stage companies over the next 7 or 8 years, what that really means in total funding is in like the billions and billions of dollars that these companies are going to be raising and deploying. Right. And a few of them are going to decide that they want to contribute to Chattanooga and put their roots down here, and others are going to go back to wherever they came from or other cities, but that's totally fine. If we can retain a quarter of our teams over the next 10 years, we're talking about 25, 30 Series B, C, D, E, pre-IPO companies that are doing it here. Yeah. And that'll change the city.
So if you could, and I've got a couple more questions for you, but if you could kind of explain for those who, like I said, when the Lamppost was doing, there's a lot of questions around what exactly are they doing? Like, what how does that work exactly?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of for people who aren't, people who do know, don't understand really how it works. Can you just kind of explain kind of how it works, what your goals are when inside that? Because I know you're you're not just writing a check out of your own personal checking account. You're raising money for the fund and all that thing. Can you explain some of those things?
Sure. So essentially, venture capital is it's equity financing, meaning we are buying a part of a company for cash, and the company's taking the cash, and then they're using that to grow really quickly. Yeah. And so when we make an investment in a company, when it's 2 or 3 co-founders and no employees, obviously the valuation of that company is a lot smaller than where it's going to be when there are 2, 3, 4, 500 employees or more. Our ownership, we take the risk early on to find these outlier, founders. Obviously, and our ownership in the company remains the same as we, take on pro rata and maintain our ownership in the business over time. But we've raised capital from our LP base of almost it's entirely local LPs. So friends of ours who are operators that we've worked with, some of the core foundations in town, a lot of the sort of usual suspects that are interested in business and involved in the business community in Chattanooga. They put money into our second fund. If we go and 10x that fund, it's a $20 million fund. So let's say, we create, $200 million in gains on that, on the money that they gave us over a 10 or 12 year period. That's going to be absolutely massive for, not just for our LPs, but what are they going to do with that capital once we return it to them? They're going to reinvest in the startup community. And, we see this as, we know the city is desirable. We know that 10 years from now, Chattanooga is going to be one of the most desirable places to live in the U.S. And we can really accelerate that with bringing in the builders and not the takers, the people that, are coming to Chattanooga to say, "Ooh, that's nice. I like what you've done there. I want some of that." We prefer to bring in the types of people that are like, I want to help you build this place. I want to contribute to building the economy here and creating jobs. And so that's the really exciting part for us. But our LPs that backed us and are the first fund that we raised are going to be able to take credit for that.
Yeah. Final question here is just when you're mentoring, a young company, right? Someone who's kind of been there, done that, kind of an idea.
Yeah.
What is the thing that you're getting value out of when you're teaching and you're coaching and you're mentoring? Like, what is that part?
There's a huge selfish component to this in that, Matt and me and Ted and Alan and Barry, we want to be around people that are super ambitious and putting it all on the line and betting on themselves. And to be able to come into work every day and, be able to provide guidance. And by no means, like, this is not an accelerator. We don't have a program like we're not doing workshops for paid customer. These are top tier founders that don't need that, but they do need somebody to talk to when everything's going wrong. And everything is almost always going wrong in these companies. And so we may be gluttons for punishment, but it's like, being able to be in an environment where we can actually help people sort of navigate a really tough time. Once you've been through it before, you can kind of like, you can take a look that's a little less volatile than maybe, the first time that you ever went through it, and provide just some, a steady hand, usually more than anything, on just keep laying brick. Just keep showing up, keep working the problem. And if you do that long enough and you manage to not die, you're going to build something valuable. And honestly, that's probably 90% of the guidance that we give our teams is just keep going.
A big thanks to Cam Doody for this conversation. And we're not finished talking about entrepreneurship and Brickyard. Next time on the show, we'll talk to Luke Brickman. He's a founder for Texla. That's one of the companies in the Brickyard portfolio. Luke moved to Chattanooga to learn from Cam and the other founders at Brickyard. We get into that story next time on Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. This podcast is a production of News Channel 9, Fox Chattanooga, and Sinclair Broadcast Group Chattanooga. We hope you join us again real soon.